Councilmember Fish.
The thing that jumped to mind just now is that if we don't know anything, why the hell is the government mandating that everyone buy parking? I really am amazed, because I agree. I mean, we don't know. ITE, that guidebook is completely made up, and every from the 50s, they just kind of wrote it down. Like if a bar has 300 square feet, it needs a parking space. If it's got a dance floor, then it needs an extra one per 200. This is made up. And when people study it now, it generally results in more parking than is demanded, even with the surplus parking. And indeed, last year, a pretty robust study came out that said that far more of a predictor for how much people drive, how much demand there is for vehicle miles traveled, is the availability of, or the requirement. We're talking about mandates. We're talking about mandatory parking on number one, that people have to pay for. That more than the quality of transit access, Bubba Fish mentioned this, the 2021 study, you can listen to it on UCLA Housing Pod with the principal investigator, that more than the quality of transit service, the availability, or really the mandate that people buy parking, is a better predictor for transit use and how much they're going to drive. So if we don't know, we should not be requiring anybody to build a single space of parking, because you're right, we don't know. We don't know. I would say abolish parking minimums citywide tomorrow. Simple code amendment. And I think, that it may sound radical to some people, but I think it's fairly radical to require people who don't own a car to pay for parking when they go to the grocery store, or when they go to the shoe store, or when they go to a restaurant, or when they rent a condo, or whatever. I mean, because that's the status quo. The status quo is that there are 200 miles of parking in LA County. And if you look within the urbanized area of the Los Angeles metro, 40% of our land, our most precious thing, 40% is paved over for parking and on-street parking and streets. There's reality. I mean, that's absurd. That is absurd. And the fact is that eliminating parking minimums, all you're doing is you're telling the person who's going to be doing the new use or the developer that they know better, which I would think they'd have agreement from over there. That I don't think that we're in a position to tell people what to do with their property and how many parking spots to put on it. We just don't know. We can regulate the street, and I would support making it a little easier for neighborhoods that don't have permits to get residential parking permits, so that we can address that legitimate neighborhood concern. The other thing, I know that I'd seen a big kerfuffle about the survey, and so I asked the social science researcher about it, and she laughed at me and said, how many surveys are you going to take before you take climate action? How many surveys do you need to facilitate more affordable housing? And then she pointed out the same things that Ms. Black did about, and staff didn't offer this as a scientifically valid survey. It was a sounding board, like a focus group. And I thought it was valuable. It certainly revealed the preferences of the people who took it. But so to get to the point, one more gloss is just, there's just been a ton of research on this lately. And we know that parking mandates stifle housing construction. We know that when San Diego reformed its parking to greatly reduce parking mandates, that there was a 6-fold increase in the construction of subsidized affordable housing, because that's a major cost for those developers. We know that mandatory parking increases the cost of literally everything in our society. Donald Shoup has written 2 books on it. If you're not familiar with his work, he was one of our general plan speakers in the speaker series. I can't recommend his presentation enough. He's done it a lot, and he's very clear. I mean, mandatory parking contributes to the urban heat island effect. If it's a surface parking lot, few things contribute more. There's no biodiversity on a surface parking lot. If you bury it underground, you're embedding carbon of digging out soil and transporting it to wherever you're going to dump it for all eternity. It increases stormwater runoff. The materials in pavement leach into our drinking water, and it's part of our bodies. We get to, you're made of parking somewhat. So, I mean, this is not, I'm speaking very, forcefully, but it's not even that big a change, because just eliminating parking minimums I've spoken to developers and, and financiers, that's the other piece of this, regulatory part, the market part, and then what people will finance. You know, we're in transition. People are getting more comfortable with financing these projects. Developers are getting more comfortable with less parking. It's going to be incremental. When we talk about our particular trip here, our particular trip there, we're ignoring the other 10 million people in the region, many of whom don't want to pay for parking. So this is one point of agreement I have with Councilmember Erickson, that I support unbundling. I think that no one should be required to pay for the building's parking. Once you're unbundling, though, I think you have to kind of eliminate minimums, because somebody has to do that calculation of how many people in this building are going to pay the $200 a month or whatever it costs for parking. So I'll get to the point here. I would eliminate parking minimums tomorrow. I mean, it's easy. Just cross it all out. I think parking maximums, I'm sensitive to the comments of Mr. Shabsis that, we have to be a little more careful though, but I support parking maximums after we do the work, have the meetings, do the studies, figure out where and how much to impose. My gut says we do with the ITE guidebook and say that's the maximum in areas within a half-mile of transit. In my perfect world, the parking reductions for mobility measures wouldn't matter because we've eliminated the parking minimums. And the other piece of research that's come out recently is that these types of pretextual value capture efforts, that if we reduce the parking, then, if you do this for the community, then we can reduce the parking, they don't really work because the developers know that they can charge more if they have the parking. So it's a trade-off between, do they want to offer a lower cost product to someone who has an office where they don't need employee parking, or to an apartment owner who doesn't need to rent? Do they want to exploit that part of the market, or do they not? They don't really value the idea of trading the parking for more expenses. It's just serving different parts of the market. So number 3, I don't want to express opinion on it unless I have to, which sounds like I might not. I support codifying the TDM so that we're not spending, to the extent that's the best practice. I really have to turn to staff for this. It does seem like coming up with a per project TDM approach is very time consuming, but maybe it's beneficial. I'd like to know more, but I support codifying and setting screenings so that the certain size businesses are getting impacted and we're not hitting the little guys, as Mr. Von Cannon mentioned. Bike parking, I think we do need to look at that and make sure that we're providing sufficient bike parking, because sure, not everyone bikes, but when you do, you sure notice the deficiencies in bike parking. The thing that really jumps out to me there is that there is a little bit of a revolution going on with e-bikes. There were more e-bikes sold last year than electric vehicles, and of course, our Resources Board has told us for a long time, and now the IPCC Commission tells us that electric cars alone won't do it. So we need other things, whether it's work from home, denser communities, bicycling, whatever. But e-bikes could be a big part of the future, and I think we need quality bike lockers that are available for people to use all over the place that can lock. I totally support this. Another one where I just as enthusiastically as I enthusiastically agree with Councilmember Erickson. I definitely think we should try to make it a little more transparent and codified as to how people can use automated or stacked parking. That's another area where there are some improvements. And if you are burying the parking, you have a less of a carbon, impression if you are maximizing, not digging as much because you've got automated or stacked parking. And then finally, the change of use. I eliminate the parking minimums, please. I beg you, and that would include change of use. Thank you.